So I didn't think I would be talking about some meta surreal anime today, but it ended up being like that. Hello everyone, welcome to the Weeb Initiative. I'm your host, the Weeb. This is the show where every other week I'll be talking about anime, manga, and everything in between. This week I'll be talking about something a bit different from everything else that I talk about. Today we're talking about Mahou Shoujo Magical Destroyers. I know, I talk about Mahou Shoujo every other week by this point, but hear me out on this one. So before I even start, some disclaimers. So this is kind of hard to say, but I want to say spoiler alert, even though I don't think that me spoiling anything will lessen the experience of actually watching this, because this here is more than ever, whenever I say this, because it's pretty common, this is something that you need to actually watch to feel it. In some ways I would say this is like baby's first monogatari entry, something like that. If you watch something from Shaft, either Monogatari or Mekako Shaft or something in that ballpark, even Madoka to some extent, I would say that this is pretty in that ballpark, though it reaches some different heights and go in different directions from those shows. So I wouldn't say it's close, but it's kind of similar. And adding to that, there is I think a whole context that we need to go on, because judging this anime not only in terms of a review, but really judging this anime overall, if you watch this, is I think a rather interesting experience, because nothing of it is actually conclusive, and I'll get to that. So before I even start, let's get to the stats. So, Mahou Shoujo Magical Destroyers, or Magical Destroyers, just to get a bit short, originally created by Jun Inagawa. And I will not claim that I know anything about this guy really, though through a bit of research, he is involved with a lot of how did they say in the video, side quests in the art world. So he's done music, he's done DJing, he's done clothes for different bigger artists and stuff. He is originally born in Japan but raised in California, from if I remember correctly, and didn't come back to Japan until he was at high school age. He tried to be a mangaka at 18, didn't get to that, and then found his ways through other things. I think he's nearly 30 years old at this point, and created this anime. So there's that. The guy sure has a creator track record, let's say. And this is to say that some of his characterization on some of the characters and other stuff, other aspects of this whole anime is American inspired more than anything. It sometimes gives off some of that panty and stocky energy. You see some of the references kind of baked in, some kind of I see that there's a trace there, but well, this anime also is done by Biburi Animation Studios, also known as the guys who have done or still doing the 100 Girlfriends That Really Love You anime adaptation. So in that sense, these guys, even though the studio is kind of new, they really know what they're doing. And that's basically it for stats. The original run from this was from April 2023 to June 2023, with 12 episodes, no extras, and a failed gacha game, which I may have to touch on a bit later, but that is to... I'll get to that. So, and here's the thing with this review. There is, let's say, 3 parts of this review. There is the plot summary, which I want to do it really quickly. Then there is the explanation of what the hell is going on, which is let's say the biggest spoiler. And then I want to just rant about what I think actually happens in this anime. So we'll go with that. Just to start, okay, I think that the this, more than anything, this is the one anime which the opening and the ending really do spoil everything. So there's that, but I'll get to that when we get there. So a plot summary. So let's say back in 2008, in an alternate history, for one reason or another, the Japanese government started hunting otakus, or whatever otaku kind you are. So there's this whole thing, and this is something that needs to be translated to those who have not reached still that level of research yet when talking about anime stuff. We here in the West generally say otaku as someone who likes anime specifically, but it is a more general word towards people with different specific interests. So there are military otakus, history otakus, or I don't know, train otakus, as I said. And anyways, so there are different kind of otakus, car otakus. I think it's Itachi drivers, those guys with the anime girl on the car. Those are a kind of otakus and stuff. So there's that. In that sense, the Japanese government starts hunting every single one of the otakus and destroying the different objects of interest and so on and so forth, creating the concentration camps. But and the whole thing kind of goes there. And we have our main protagonist, Otaku Hiro, who we never actually get to know the real name of, and this is from the get-go, who resists this whole kind of incursion of this new force called the Shogun Army and creates a resistance, retakes Akihabara and so on and so forth. And 3 years into the revolution, so 2008 to 2011, he kind of loses his spark a bit, but adding to the fact that he is part of this revolution and the leader of it, he is accompanied by, at the very beginning, one magical girl, one Mahou Shoujo, called Mahou Shoujo Anarchy, who is, for the foreseeable future, our main heroine. And the first episode, basically, is just her trying to re-spark his fire and actually grow his rage against the system and so on and so forth. The whole thing about anarchy, but anarchy is not really the thing about not having a government system and whatever. But anyways, so the whole thing about the first episode is them fighting back. Anarchy actually transforming for the first time in a long time and fighting back against the Shogun Army and retaking Akihabara. Add to that, then they find their second Mahou Shoujo Blue, who is kind of a pervert. There's this whole, and unfortunately I will not remember. I mean, given like timelines, right? So if you ever watched or read Gushing Over Magical Girls, she feels really close to Blue from Magical Girls. I don't know if there is I don't know, some kind of inner joke in there that Blue is symbolizing pervertness or something like that, but it's weird it happened twice. Kinda. Anyways, so basically, right, the whole thing goes from there. Second episode, we find our third and last Mahou Shoujo. There is Pink. Pink in specific, she talks in a weird code which Blue has to translate every time, so we never actually get to listen to Pink actually speak, so there's that. And she always wears the gas mask for one reason or another, we don't actually know. Goes from there, the whole anime basically, it goes from different battles to different kind of ideas. Each episode goes from one event in this revolutionary army and so on and so forth, until I think episode 9, if I'm not mistaken, which then is the start of the end of the anime, which at that point you get pretty sure that something is wrong, and then we get the full like kind of explanation of the whole thing. So the main villain for this whole story is the guy called Shobon. He's a guy with a TV head, much like I don't remember the name of the character from Hazbin Hotel, but you know who I'm talking about. I have not watched Hazbin Hotel, if you don't get that, because from what I know, he's like the main character or something, one of the main. Anyways, So he has his own magical girl called Slayer. She's what they eventually call the complementary like color or girl for Anarchy, to then spark the whole thing about the end of the anime, but I'll get there when I'll not really enter in detail towards the end, because in a sense it doesn't really matter that much. I wish, and this is a thing, right? So quick tangent here. I wish in a better story, in a better world, we may have been able to. I wish I could record watch along with me, being like really reacting any kind of deal, that watch every single one of the episodes and then I pause and start to rant about theories and stuff. Because, and here's the thing, this anime is by its very nature really confusing. And just to finish the plot summary, okay, when we reach, I think, episode 9, Shobon actually reveals to Otaku Hiro that actually everyone in the world that they live in is inside a video game that Shobon created, and everyone there is an NPC, with the only exception being the magical, like, little animal, the QB equivalent, for those who watch Madoka, that accompany them throughout the whole story and stuff. And the thing that kind of is the plot twist, or not even the plot twist, but the whole like conclusion of the story, is that Shobon has already written everything that happens, and in writing that, he writes that Otaku Hiro ends up dying by the hand of the magicals, the Mahou Shoujo, that transform into magical destroyers as soon as they defeat their equivalent parts in the final battle. So there's this huge build up towards the end of the anime, which they do go and fight their actually Anarchy defeats Slayer, and Blue and Pink go against their own counterparts somewhat, and in doing that they become evil, more or less. They become evil, lose all their memories, and kill Otaku Hiro on the spot. And by doing that, the script of Shobon is complete, even though, and then here's the plot twist of the plot twist. If Shobon controls the world, the anime would end there, but it doesn't actually end, and it goes on to show off a second generation of the revolutionary army that originally started this thing about trying to free all the otaku from Japan and stuff, which then destroys the whole premise of this being a video game. And this is the crux of Magical Destroyers, actually. And this is basically the plot summary. It doesn't make sense talking about this, and this is one which, and just to comment, okay, I understand that this shit's so confusing that anyone like really down to earth would like bounce out of it, like really like reject it outright. But, and this is like me talking about myself. As time goes on, I feel like I lean towards more towards the more artsy kind of anime and stuff, somewhat, which then gives me the idea that this anime is actually well done. And this is the part where I need to actually say that judging this anime by what exactly is shown is kind of hard, because it is one of, and this is the thing, this anime to me at the very least is a meta comedy. It is a parody of an anime, because at the end of the day it does not follow what a normal anime would do. The character designs is specifically for the villains, and not only that, but also the different symbology of everything that happens in this anime. So for instance, there is this one part at the very beginning, the first like big boss that they face off against, who's a guy from the Shobon army that runs pilots a mech. And then this one mech, when we're shown how it's being built, it's like one giant gunpla kind of sprue. So there is a giant pair of clippers that come and take the piece out of the sprue and paints it with a giant spray can and so on and so forth. And it ends up being that the guy actually is a car otaku, but he has been brainwashed by the Shogun army and stuff. And there is this whole symbology of he built his mech through an otaku method because he's otaku at the end of the day, but he doesn't know. And there's this whole thing, right? And there's this whole symbology throughout the whole of the anime that really messes up with the idea of this being a normal anime. And none better, and I think the biggest example of that is specifically the opening. The opening of this anime is one of the most beautiful, weird, and strange things I ever watched. I watched in a long time. So it begins really, really normal, really down to earth, really close to what you would think a normal anime opening would be. Though the symbology and the things that happen are a bit weird, but it is within normality, let's say. Then the title card comes in and the music changes. The whole thing, and this one part where please don't watch this with high volume because I don't like Noiseotron that much, the musical genre, though I have like endured for a whole lot of years, so I have like a natural resistance to it. But I think a lot of people will not like the second part of the song. And this second part of the song is when the whole of the symbology gets kind of thrown out the window, and then the whole thing kind of gets scrambled until the point where the last frame of the opening is a recreation of the Last Supper, which then carries on its own symbology in the whole anime, with obviously Otaku Hero being the center, so you know for a fact that he's going to die, even though the anime doesn't actually show this until the very end of it. And for the most part, I would say it does not become really clear that this will happen, but it is something that if you look into it, the opening already like tells you about it. And there are like a whole lot of these different like signals and stuff. Specifically, and this is the thing, the first episode specifically is so fucking confusing. It is, and I can't like really explain this that much here because I don't have the aid of visual examples and stuff. But the first episode specifically is such a confusing thing, and it only becomes kind of clear later, but there's still a lot of things that happen in the first episode specifically that don't actually get explained whatsoever. And then there's this whole thing about this being a video game by the end. And so just to be clear, right now I'm talking specifically to like people who actually have watched this. If you have not watched it, please pause this, watch the whole thing. It's only 12 episodes, it's not that long, and come back if you can. But this is my thing, right? So this whole anime is a mess, though I think it somewhat is art in its purest form, because by the end of it is really like depending on the interpretation that you have, because some people, and I went looking, like the last episode specifically is such a trick because it tells you the truth of the word of the story, but at the same time it does not show itself as being it, because, and there are two things, right? So to the point that Otaku Hero existed, everything was going through Shogun's script, so much so that he actually had the storyboard for each of the scenes and stuff. Though there is no explanation of why there would be another second Otaku Hero, and he would say that something's out of the script, because if he created the world, there shouldn't be anything to like modify this. And adding to that, too, the fact of the matter is that the secondary characters in this anime specifically, they feel like NPCs. They are really, really, really dumb. story is annoyingly, and I think it is purposeful the way that they do it, that anything and everything is centered around Otaku Hero. There is no advancement to the story that does not start and end with Otaku Hero being involved. It becomes kind of annoying at some point, but I think that, and this is the thing, right? So by the end of it, they've revealed that Kyotaro, or Origin, is the only player in the world, but at the same time we never actually see them have an input on anything. There is one thing that could explain most of everything, but anyways, they don't actually have any input in the whole world, so we don't actually see them as players unless the whole game is a visual novel, which then recontextualizes the whole thing about script and choices. But the thing is, right, the anime doesn't make any sense in itself. What it says is not exactly what goes on, and in that there is a rift. So, and this is the part where I want to talk about my theory, because at the end of the day there are no actual explanations. From what I could find, Inagawa-san didn't actually give an explanation for what actually happens in this anime. The only idea is that you need to like what you like, and do not be afraid of liking what you like, and be excited about. I think it's more of that. Be excited about what you like, because this is the thing that you have, is what you like, your interests, the stuff that makes you is the things that interest you, and that is the idea. There is let's say a tinge of Lelouch Code Geass, more or less, towards the end, when the guy takes the helmet from Otaku Hiro after he dies, that the idea that Otaku Hiro exclaims throughout the whole anime is stronger than a single person, and will live through its existence. So there is that. And then getting back to it, there is this whole thing about the theories. There are theories that say that the whole anime is just a huge message about liking what you like. That's the whole thing. The story, the plot doesn't actually matter. Then there are theories that Otaku Hiro was not dead, that something changed midway or something like that. And again, I can give visual aids for this, but in my head and in seeing everything that appears in the anime, I feel like the meta narrative is actually only shown, and again, this is only a theory. I could not prove this if I liked, and I think someone smarter than me would probably find a way to break this theory, and it may have a whole lot of holes. But the theory that I have is within the ending. The ending specifically, it is really abrupt in the way that it shows its imagery. So the first thing that we see in the ending is I think you call a lab light, a surgery room kind of light setup, and the person in the bed is Otaku Hiro, which then says that he is going through a surgery, and adding to that, there are a whole lot of different, not only symbology, but there are a lot of references that choose even more in when the second part of the opening appears. There are a whole lot of references to lobotomies, which then leads me to think that what happens in the actual world is that Otaku Hiro, for some reason, is a normal person that went into the hospital, most likely, and this is total conjecture, okay? So again, this is my theory. I don't know if this is true or not, but to me, it is like Otaku Hiro is at the hospital, or his actual him is at the hospital after having a maritime disaster, a maritime accident. He tried to save 3 girls, and which is symbolized by the change in the opening, from the first to the second part, when he actually enters the water that they are drowning in and tries to hug them all. I think that's the symbology of him trying to save them from actual water, and also because the ending shows them splatted, lying on the beach not exactly knowing if they are alive or dead, but and the whole thing that happens in the anime itself is a delusion of himself to guard his interests and like the core of him inside of his body. So the whole thing, and this is the theory, the whole thing about the revolution and the fight for the otakus and stuff is that he had some kind of problem when he regained consciousness, and they are trying through lobotomy to fix a part of him, but internally he sees it as someone trying to erase his otaku-ness. And so for that reason, Shobon and Otaku Hiro are the same person, which would not be necessarily that far off, because at some point we do see that Shobon has somewhat of a close enough visual appeal to Otaku Hiro. We don't actually see his face, and also because the delirium of origin itself is kind of a weird one, because that later on we do see her physical body and stuff, so there's this whole thing. And so there is a part of me that thinks that the original Otaku Hiro is the part of his personality that's trying to fight back from like this kind of reprogramming, and Shobon is kind of the more adjusted side that they are trying to implant on him. And that's why the second Otaku Hiro appears at the end of the anime, because by the end of it, the original Otaku Hiro has actually died. The original idea has actually died, but a seedling or some kind of adaptation of that same idea has still remained and is receding in his head. This is my theory. I don't know if it actually goes that way, because there is also the possibility that towards the end of the ending, when they actually show he being moved and stuff, and the fact that he sees the nurses as the girls that he tried to save, or maybe the girls that he sees the girls that he saved as the nurses, but then you have to ask why Pink always appears in the gas mask and stuff. And so there are huge like holes in my theory, but the thing is, right, so there's a possibility that when he goes through the surgery and he actually died after surgery, and even though he went into being kind of adjusted because of Shobon, the part that is receding his mind is like the delirium before his actual death, because there is this whole thing about you have like 7 minutes of brain activity before you actually die, and so you have like 7 minutes of dreams before you die. So there's a thing like that. I'm not a medical professional, but from what I understand, there is a thing related to that. And even though I have been like talking about this whole thing, about this whole theory, most likely it's not right, because again, this is not conclusive. There are no explanations, and I think in a way this is the nice thing about this whole anime, because it is interpretative, so much so, and this is a thing, right? So there is one specific battle that they do against one of the big bosses and stuff that is inside basically a video game, and when the characters and the enemies kind of go near that, they kind of start to pixelate against the background, so the background stays the same, but the enemy itself begins to pixelate, which then calls in question on whether or not they're visual metaphors that they use more than that. Like, can I say, for instance, that any drop in quality in terms of animation or art in the whole anime is intentional, or is it a fault of the studio? Because at some point, I don't know, it could be a metaphor, it could not. You never know. Like, holy shit, how can I actually like judge something like that? And I think this is the fun part about this. The anime itself, it shows so much style, so much of artistic vision in what they wanted to do with it, that it leaves only interpretation for the rest of us, the audience. And this is the part where I need to actually say that, and I can't prove it, but in a meta sense, I think it's funny to think about this, that they actually got, back when this released, they released also a gacha game with it. There are some footage of it on YouTube and stuff, but it looks pretty bad, and was cancelled I think 6 months after releasing, and it looks really really rough. And in a way, in a meta sense, I think it is a dig against Shogun's kind of conflict that he had originally. The reason why he created the world and so on and so forth was because he hated the people that hated his original game, and that's why he created the second. And I don't know if it is a metaphor to say that we tested the original game. If we watched the second one and we tested the second and we tested the first game, to say that the second was better than the first, because at the end of the day the players are us, and then we go from there, like, holy shit. And I don't know, what can I say? Animation. I think that the animation fulfills its purpose. Again, I cannot say for certain if a drop in quality is intentional or not. I lean towards the fact of it being kind of intentional. The line art, the art itself is kind of rough sometimes. It has that scent of old Gainax anime somewhat. It feels closer to that than newer stuff. So 2023, you would think, I don't know, really light traces and line art and animations and stuff. This is not it. This is kind of rough sometimes. It has a really cartoonish art style, specifically on close-ups for the girls whenever they use a lot of front-facing shots, which then leads you to see the little imperfections in the traits. I don't know if that's intentional again, and for that reason I can't really say. In terms of music, and I would say that the opening and the ending scores are really great. For the insert songs, I think they're hit or miss. I think that the battle songs are mostly nice. The soundtrack for the ambience kind of stuff is decent for all intents and purposes. Though there is a number that they do. There are two numbers that they do. I think on episode 9, really, episode 8 or 9. That is first Otaku Hiro playing the guitar alone, and then the girls singing with Otaku Hiro. Not my cup of tea. I know that Anarchy is Jolene, but even then, bro, not for me at the release. I know some people may like it, but I did. With that said, again, animation I can't judge, not objectively at the release. But and this is the thing, if I can leave you with something for this review, please watch it and comment. What did you think about it? Is my theory like really out of the realm of normality? Am I smoking crack? Like, or do you have a better theory? Do you think that I'm looking too much into it? There is something that I mistook or I overlooked or something like that. And what did you think about this? Because this is art. I think it's better to be discussed than actually. I think trying to decipher it more than anything is part of the journey, and for that reason I really like this anime. I have had this anime for a long ass time in my bucket list, and finally getting to watch this was a huge trip, but goddamn if I wouldn't take it again. It was really nice, really weird and rough around the edges, but really nice still. So with that being said, thank you guys for listening, thank you guys for watching. Please like, please share, please follow depending on the platform you're in, and I hope stick around for next time. Bye.